Enough dawdling. Oh, how should I? I'll just do this. There we go. Okay. And then what I can do I had this one chili, it set my mouth on fire and I had to drink myself a whole 2-liter Mountain Dew. You guys know what I'm talking about?
It sounds familiar, but I don't know where it's from.
It sounds very familiar.
Alright, hold on. You're watching my screen share, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, it's this guy, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I tried this one chili and it set my mouth on fire and I had to drink a 2-liter of Mountain Dew.
Yeah, I know him.
Oh, shoot.
It was funny.
Go. No, not that. What is this? Okay, that can go away as well. And that, and that. Alrighty. So, for those who do know, this is the story I've been working on for a while. For those who don't, this is a story based off of a NPC storyline that was never fully explained or explored because the players in that campaign disappeared. Hunter, you were there for that when I invited you in. Basically, the entire original cast of characters in that campaign were gone.
Oh, was it Horizon?
Yeah, Horizon. Basically, it broke down kind of right near the end, almost in the middle end, like the last 2/3 of it, where I basically had to entirely reboot the campaign with an entirely new plot and everything, and just kind of quickly tie it up as quickly as possible. So the campaign didn't really end very nice, but there was a lot of build up to something that we never really got to experience or explore. Especially there was this one character that we never got to see a whole lot of. So I wanted to, because I liked the character so much and I had some stuff written down, I was like, you know what, I'll just throw all these scenes together and make like a little story out of it. And since then I've kind of struggled with it back and forth, trying to decide how best to accurately like make it readable to an audience. But yeah, I'm not gonna waste time with the forward. I'm just gonna go straight into the actual story. And as always, I like to have music in the background, so I think I'm just going to bring that into the general channel, if that's alright with you guys. I've got a new music bot Alexander, so you'll have to adjust this.
Oh yeah, I know. I was spying on you guys last night.
Okay.
Does
Oh,
it
joy.
work better than the old one?
It does, in the sense that I can actually use the music bot to do stuff. Oh, jeez.
Fair enough.
I have to vote for the bot to be able to do stuff, which is annoying, but at least it works. There was this other music bot that I actually subscribed to on Patreon to be able to do what I want to, and it still didn't work, so that was super annoying. Okay. The ocean rages and the sky falls. Waves splash up on either side of the ship as heavy rain falls down. Treacherous waters pour across every inch of wood, soaking the boat to its core in dreaded weight. Torrents of water slam down onto the deck in heavy sheets, as if to challenge the slamming waves that toss the vessel to and fro in order to see who could flood the vessel first. The night is as dark and cold as the lifeless waters. Lightning shatters in the background, cutting through the dark void to bathe this nightmare in light for less than a moment. Thunderous splintering calls and response, rousing those who hoped this was a dream back to the horror of reality. A solitary figure stands at the stern of the ship. A massive limb grasps the bow of the ship, or bow. The rest of the crew had either fallen overboard or drowning in the decks below. The sound of splintering wood can be heard beneath the waters, as the ship itself is wrestled for its contents. The figurehead is strangled by a gigantic barnacled claw, while the body of the beast scuttles underneath the ship, stabbing into the hull for footholds. The mandibles crack open the keel of the ship, draining the crew and their cargo into the mouth of the beast. The figure stands unfazed, feeling no fear or remorse for what is happening. As torrents of water braid every inch of their body, they slowly reach for the hilt of a giant sword affixed to their back. The blade, a beautiful iridescent pearl that doesn't change with the lack of or barely acquired light, as if its ghostly texture was something beyond the physical world. Streaks of water race off its edge as the figure raises the sword, careening down upon the infected carapace. An unholy roar is muffled by the gurgling waves. Crewmen and Wood smash back inside the ship as the creature yells in pain. The ship is pushed beneath the waves as the monster crawls atop the vessel to approach its attacker. The sword slashes upwards, penetrating straight past the eyes and into the mind of the creature before it could even perceive the figure. There was no one to observe the victory or applaud their savior, but this act was not selfish. This was merely a job, work to be dealt with, and now that their chore was completed, the figure watches the creature slowly sink into the water, allowing the boat to resurface, if only momentarily. As the figure turns away from their work, suddenly the claw clamps around them. The instinctual grasp of the dead creature crushed the figure too quickly for any cries of pain, and if there was any, they would be drowned out by the water that rushes around them. This was annoying. The figure strained against the dead man's grip that held her. She battered its shell with her bare feet. Her long flowing hair trailed behind her as the corpse weighed her down. Her emerald eyes burned with fury at the gall that this monster had for causing her strife, like a mere insect that bites at the finger of their exterminator. It takes a moment and a significant amount of exertion before the claw shatters. Carapace and sinew fly outwards in all directions. The silver sword flies into the hand of the killer as she rages at the beast. She glides through the water towards the massive creature, cracking the shell she slams into it. Her sword flashes in the water like lightning as she stabs in and out, spraying gore and viscera into the water. She grips the entrails until she tires, her temper fading. She lets the remains fall to the ocean floor below. Her eyes roll into the back of her head as she seethes, floating in the water, spent after her outburst. The ocean growls at her. She opens her eyes, glancing around. Staring at her in the murky depths is a huge reptilian face. A massive snake-like head looms in the darkness, much larger than any ship she's ever seen. Its scales are chunks of deep green rock. Its nostrils are two huge slits that couldn't even use a sail as a tissue. Its massive eyes are as wide and golden as the sunrise. Had it intervened, it could have stopped the entire conflict in a moment with a single bite of its gargantuan jaw. And yet, it simply stares. Its presence is terrifying, but its inaction is even more ominous. Skadi glares back, unflinchingly at the beast. Her face drains of emotion, and all the fight she had in her body melts into the dark waters. But she is not afraid. Its unholy gaze is unwavering, judgmental even, and Skadi returns in kind with disgruntled annoyance. After several long moments of disdainful looks, the massive head cranes up, rushing towards the water's surface. Skadi kicks off, forcing the water downward as she flies upward, exploding out of the water. She sails towards a rocky outcropping. She lands atop the wet stone that would cause most people to slip and fall back into the depths, but Skadi's feet were nimble and experienced. With an arrogant flourish of her hand, she discards the water soaked into her clothes back into the sea. She takes a moment to wipe the hair out of her face before pivoting on her heel to glare back at the massive sea serpent. The gigantic beast towers over her. Despite its size, it moves gracefully through the water, causing barely any turbulence or waves as it moves. The massive amounts of water it displaces with every movement barely register against the ocean surface. In moments, its skin is also clear as the water trickles down the back of its head into the sea from whence it came. Its gaze was still fixed upon Skadi in a disapproving scowl. "Are you gonna say anything, or are you just gonna keep looking at me like I'm rotting meat?" Skadi exclaims. She takes several steps backwards along the bank before spinning and looking away. She squats down near the water, swiping another hair from her face. "Your mother never wanted us to argue in the water," the sea serpent says. Its voice was deep, unfathomably so. There was no grating, though, no guttural roar or earth-trembling bass. It was as if this cataclysmic creature was whispering. "How's that working out for you?" Skadi asks. It wasn't much of a comeback. There were countless other things she wanted to retort, but she was frazzled. It never felt good to be judged by a creature of supreme intelligence and power. This was especially true for a parent to criticize their child. "You know that I cannot summon my full form to this plane of existence, let alone rise it above the water," he scolds. "Yeah," Skadi says with a sigh. "You're both inside and outside at the same time." She waves her hand wildly as she plants herself in the ground and huff. The sea creature furrows its brow, which is quite the sight to see. Imagine an entire hill suddenly wobbling at its peak and caving inward. "I am all-encompassing," he reiterates. "It is my duty as the Ouroboros to guard the borders of reality and keep everything contained." "I liked it better when you kept all your..." Sorry. "I liked it better when you kept your tail in your mouth," Skadi mumbles. It was that kind of mumble, or the attempt to say it quietly. Bah. Goodness, I need water. Hold on. I'm basically saying, like, I wish you shut up. "I liked it better when you kept your tail in your mouth," Skadi mumbles. It was a kind of mumble where you attempt to say it quietly so that the other person doesn't hear, but just loud enough that they might because you secretly want them to hear. Needless to say, this was said about an omnipresent entity that very much heard what she said, no matter the inflection. "That was before I was given my second duty as the Nidhogg," he explains. "With matters as it is, there is much work to be done. With the Pantheon still recovering, they delegated the task to me, as they viewed my previous task as simple enough to continue with more work." Excuse me.
Tired, Sparrow?
A little bit. That was more than a millennia ago, Skadi points out. Haven't they found someone to take care of stuff like that? The sea serpent's face turns solemn. That's why the training and delegating of demigods such as yourself are so important, he says. You're bigger than the universe and you're being delegated as a gardener, Skadi blurts out. The word delegated was said with such malice and made the humongous creature recoil. Skadi takes several long seconds to catch her breath before pulling her long white hair over her shoulder to stroke it. We all have our duties, the serpent says slowly. You're Jormungandr, the world serpent, Skadi whispers. She looks up at the towering creature. But to me, you're my dad. His face softens, and he lowers his head down towards it. If the sun had been at a different spot in the sky, she might have been shrouded in darkness. You still have much to learn, he says. She lowers her head, clutching onto her ponytail. It was the only thing that she had to remember her mother by. She remembered being held by a woman with warm arms and cool hair. Skadi could use a hug right now, but she knew she could never receive that kind of affection from her father. I thought I did a good job, Skadi mutters, trying to hold back tears. Serving mortals means more than simply felling beasts. I took care of their problem while leaving them with several more to deal with. Are we supposed to solve all of the issues of mortals? Skadi accuses. I thought gods weren't supposed to intervene. She was standing now, defiantly yelling at the creature before her. She clenches her hands and jaw tightly. If she closed herself off any more, he knew he would lose her for good. You are not a god, he explains. Not yet. Skadi closes her eyes, trying to find a way to breathe in order to make another comeback. How convenient, she says. She turns away from him, crossing her arms. You have a duty to the people of these realms, he continues. You are capable of many things. Because of the powers you possess, you have to act in a way that condones the safety and preservation of life. Not all life, she mutters. Man, I really need lots of water in the morning, apparently.
Redeems Hydra.
What?
Redeems Hydra.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Where was I? Oh, just at the top of the page. You must learn responsibility, he instructs. Skadi could feel a headache growing. It was time for another lesson. Without a word, he simply turns away from her, lowering his massive form into the ocean. Skadi always dreaded this part. Despite being born of the goddess of the sea, or so she had been told, the deep ocean depths always unsettled her. Nevertheless, she followed her father, taking several long strides through the surf before stooping down to duck below the water surface. The deep green water rushed around her as she sank beneath the waves. With the last gentle push from the sandbank, she was free-floating in the water. The ocean surrounded her on all sides, the brilliant emerald liquid glowing with potent energy as the waves cast dancing shadows on the seafloor below. The massive form of her father was more prevalent now. The gigantic slithering form was like a dark-scaled wall on her left side, with the entire ocean to her right. To most people, sharing the waters with such a large serpent would be terrifying, but to Skadi, it was her only sense of comfort. The massive form of her father was more prevalent now. The gigantic slithering form was like a dark-scaled wall on her left side with the entire ocean to her right. That sentence seems kind of weird, doesn't it? The massive form of her father was more prevalent now. The gigantic slithering form was like about
Yeah, sounds a little weird.
was more of the gigantic slithering form was more of a dark scaled wall to her left side, with the entire ocean open to her on her right. See, it's little stuff like this that like makes editing something go from just like writing it out to like really taking a long time. I don't know. A lot of this first part I've kind of struggled over back and forth. Like the beginning is so important because you've got to, you got to set the scene, you got to set the characters, the motives, all this stuff. For the most part, do you guys kind of understand who these people are and what's going on, or is it kind of lost?
I can understand, but all I've been thinking about is eating the snake.
Okay.
Wonder what that would taste like, if I'm being honest. Anyways, continue if you'd like. I'm just listening.
Okay, that's fine. The gigantic slithering form was more of a dark-scaled wall on her left side, with the entire ocean open to her right. To most people, sharing the waters with such a large creature, with a large serpent, with such large serpent would be terrifying. But to Skadi, it was her only sense of comfort. The only time Skadi got to experience the closeness with her father was when they swam together like this. Lately, the only time she got to see him was when he had something important to say, such as their next task or painful criticism. Far ahead, his head turns back to look at her, and she feels the need to pick up the pace. Did the music bot die?
Nah, I don't hear any music, so maybe.
Gosh dang it. Alright, fine.
It's angry at you. You stopped reading.
I'm writing. This isn't just reading.
It wants to see the end of the story, Sparrow.
This is just the first chapter.
I know, that's the point.
Without skipping a beat, she draws on the water around herself, wrapping herself in a warm current that propels her forward. She had learned to control water at a very young age. The currents responded to her call, and swimming through the sea was as easy as walking on land. Still, she never felt like she belonged. Diving into these deep waters made her feel like a fish out of water, or, more accurately, a human in water. Her fear of the water was uncalled for, she knew. It was an irrational fear, something she couldn't control or overcome. Perhaps if her mother had been here to help her learn about the ocean growing up, but Skadi's mother was missing. She had disappeared shortly after giving birth to Skadi, and was raised solely by a giant monster that appeared less and less in her life. She had disappeared shortly after giving birth to Skadi. Who was raised solely by a giant monster that appeared less and less in her life. There was a time when he would allow her to ride him by grabbing onto his scales or perching atop his brow. Before that, he would cradle her in his maw. When the journey was too long and scary for her, he would close his jaws around her in a protective darkness that she knew nothing could penetrate. It was reassurances like this that she lacked as she grew up. She was coddled less and disciplined more. She wondered if her mother would be as harsh and controlling, but it didn't matter. She wasn't here. Where is this music? Come on, dude. Just play the stupid... There. Skadi struggled to keep her composure, but thinking about all these things was making it difficult for her to focus. Normally, she could hold her breath for a long time, long enough to trick her father into believing she was capable of breathing while in the sea. This charade was bound to be found out eventually, but today was not a good day for more scolding. Skadi closed her eyes and willed herself to calm down, to feel the massive embrace of the ocean, and take a deep breath of the ocean waters. She sucked in the cold water that stung her nose with salts and filled her lungs. She tried to breathe, but she couldn't. She was drowning. She coughed and gagged in panic. She tries to call out the...
Oh, and the music's back. Perfect timing.
Oops.
Also, welcome, snake person.
Snake person? You're the snake person.
Yeah, but I remember the only character as being the woman that's a snake that turns really big and killed a lot of gnomes.
Oh, that's right. You were the Yuan-Ti, weren't you?
That's all I remember of them.
Your Discord reactive is still not working. I don't know why.
I have no idea. I guess I'm not being defensive.
Try talking, Bell? Yeah.
You sent me the link the last time, and I opened
Hold on.
it, and it seems to be working, but try again. Maybe this time it's because I'm on my phone and I'm testing the AirPods.
I don't know. Anywho. She was drowning. She coughed and gagged in a panic. She tries to crawl out in the water, to no avail. Without a second's hesitation, she wills herself towards the surface. It was as if she willed the entire ocean down instead of herself up. And if she had been paying attention, she might have learned a valuable lesson about perspective. Reaching the water surface, she coughs up water, expelling it from her lungs. At first with guttural gas, but then with magic as she controls the water to evacuate her system and draw in fresh air. The massive head of her father rises from the waves, and he is greatly displeased. She struggles for a moment to regain her breath, all the while he simply glares at her. "So what? I can't breathe water," she sputters. The statement was made with far more venom than she had anticipated. It was bad enough that she was being belittled for almost dying, but her father had a special kind of disrespect with his judgment. "If you are inexperienced with your skills, that is one thing," Jormungandr begins. "But lying about it to me is another thing entirely." His point was valid, but that's what pissed her off even more. He only saw things as plain statements of fact and never considered the heart of the matter. He only approached things logically when her problems were more spiritual. "Oh, so now it's fine that I'm not perfect?" Skadi blurts out, splashing the water in frustration. She was calm enough to tread water, but not calm enough to will the water out of her hair. It clung to her face, covering her vision, no doubt making her look more like a helpless child in his eyes. "You were never required to achieve perfection," he says. "No, I had to be better," Skadi seethes. "Whenever I work super hard to be enough to do the right thing, it's passable. The second I make the slightest mistake is when things are unacceptable." She could feel her face burning, and she realized she was losing this argument. He waits a moment to make sure her outburst is done before speaking. "We can always improve," he points out. Without another word, he lowers himself back into the water. Skadi wanted to cry, to scream, to do anything to break this cycle. She was sick and tired of being frustrated, of this terrible situation she was in. But there was no point in fighting it. She sighs, allowing herself to fall limp as she sunk beneath the waves before turning and following once more. What do you guys think of Chapter 1?
I like the details you put into the snake.
The
No,
fun
I'm sorry, the
dynamic.
ward serpent.
What?
Hmm?
Just like the
What did Hunter say?
descriptions and whatnot?
Yeah, I like the descriptions. I never really ever do descriptions on my stuff.
It's really important to do illusions to try and help paint a picture in people's minds.
I need to learn how to do it better. Got any tips?
Basically, when you are trying to describe something, relate it to something else. So if you
What do you
want to
mean?
like
If I say
describe
yellow,
a rough
like a banana?
concrete, what?
So if I say like a certain type of yellow and then I say like a banana.
Right. Or if you want to describe a banana, you can say that it's yellow like something else that's yellow. The vibrance of the pristine yellow was like that of a golden sun in the sky that shone and caught your attention out of all of the fruits that were in the basket. Because then it kind of like describes that the banana is outshining the other fruits in like two ways, if that makes sense.
I get it.
That's what illusion is. It's like relating something to something else, not just like in a physical, this is what it looks like, but it's also doing this kind of thing. So like if you described a concrete wall as like its rough exterior was as hard and as abrasive as the dark material that it was carved from. Because that not only like describes what it looks like and what it feels like, but how it feels emotionally to you. Because you could just say that something looks dark gray and is rough, but if you describe it as being cold and foreboding, like an impervious barrier that stops one from being able to see the light of day, then it's this kind of like relation to a feeling that you get. I'm trying to think of like a really good example. There was this one thing that I read that someone related something to like darkness, and they described it as like the feeling that you get when you turn off a light and you know that there's nothing there because you just saw the room, but the feeling that you can't help but have that there might be something. I was like, oh my goodness, I relate to that. I understand that. So sometimes it's a really good idea to like get specific and be like, that one feeling that you get, it's like that. But it can be kind of difficult too, because you don't want to do something that's too specific that nobody can relate to. But sometimes having that kind of thing that everybody would understand really helps sell it. Like when he saw her, his heart sank and then jumped out of his chest as if he had slipped down a step, missing it, and his heart started beating quickly in retaliation.
That's a good one. That's a really good one.
Yeah. Like it's hard for me to like come up with these on the spot and just like talk it out. Usually I'd write this down, but yeah.
Well, that was a really good one. I gotta give you credit for that.
So
That does pretty much say a
Yeah.
lot.
because then it's more than just saying that like when the boy looked at the girl, he had feelings or his heart started beating fast or whatever. You kind of like can relate to the situation of like, oh, he likes her or something, you know. But yeah, going back to my story, the fun dynamic that I'm trying to do is that Skadi is like this child that really never learned how to be like a kid and has always been doing this, you know, the dirty work of the gods or whatever, and has just kind of been in this rough situation where she doesn't know what she wants, she doesn't know who she is, but is always being told to like be something or do something, and she's just kind of frustrated and fed up with it. But the dichotomy of their relationship is that he truly does care for her, but he can't be too honest with her because he knows that that would hurt her more. And also, he knows that the best thing that he can do for her is just tell her how to toughen up because he doesn't know how to help her, feel loved because, as a father that hasn't had that kind of relationship, he doesn't know how to do that. So a lot of the time when, Jormungandr's not talking, he's like thinking to himself like, I'm losing her, I don't know how to help her, what's the right thing to say here? Meanwhile, she's always viewing him as just like the silent foreboding figure that's just always looking down at her. So I'm like describing these perspectives of these two characters and how they perceive each other, but there's not any actual communication happening between the two of them. They completely misunderstand each other. And that's why I describe these scenes as like they're looking at each other and this is how they're feeling, but I don't actually make them say a whole lot, just how they perceive each other. Does that make sense? Also, welcome in,
It does.
Mayday.
Paimon has taken the place of the music bot.
Don't worry, I'll get the music bot back in here.
No. Now Paimon has to play music.
Oh boy. Here's a yeah,
Oh,
baby.
God damn it! Never mind, I'm gonna hit mute on Paimon. Bring back in the music bot.
He's still
I regret
moist
my
critical.
decision immediately. Oh God, yeah, he is. I forgot he's moist critical in the Friday campaign.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah, baby.
Shut
Alright.
up.
What's up, lazy?
I'm out of water, so I'll be right back.
Oh great, now two people I hate are in here.
Yo, you still down for RR craft later?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. Also, how well do you take horror maps?
I don't mind horror stuff. Usually, it doesn't scare me. That's why I don't like it that much.
Gotcha, okay.
Out of curiosity, for those that were here, does anyone feel like I missed anything or didn't do anything good, or was anybody confused by anything in Chapter 1?
Not enough
No?
banana snakes.
Oh my...
Alright. I'm just gonna go on to Chapter 2 then. Excuse me. Oh, goodness.
You good?
I had like a weird burp that tasted like something that I don't think I've ever had. Probably burped up something that was like a combination of things. Anywho. Chapter 1 was called Drowning. Chapter 2 is called Standing.
Oh, Zowning definitely fit the way chapter 1 was going.
Skadi
there goes
stumbles to the shore, dragging her emaciated form and the cold steel of her only companion onto the land. The heavy sword thunks down into the soft sand beside her, releasing a spray of particulates that gently splash into the water that washes up around her ankles. Skadi crumples to her knees. Her arms fall limp to her sides. Her head sags as she teeters on the edge of unconsciousness. Fatigue and disappointment rack her body. With fury being her only driving force, she begins to surrender to exhaustion. Her head slumps forward, long ocean-soaked hair matted against her form. Her legs shudder and collapse, planting her butt into the wet sand as she crushes her slack hands into fists into the sand. She wiggles her numb fingers into the damp soil, sifting the coarse grains against her palms to try and feel anything. This was so difficult to try and describe the act of her falling down and crumpling, because if I say sand too many times, it just sounds annoying. So that's why you have to come up with different words to describe something, because if I just say she walks up and collapses to the shore, her legs collapse beneath her and her arms collapse and then her head collapses, it starts to lose its meaning. So you have to use different words to describe things. But sometimes it gets really difficult. I'm like, what other words can I use for sand? So I use particulates and grains and soil and things. That's more of a me ranting as a writer, but yeah.
Before glass.
Yeah, before class. Actually, that would be a really cool thing if someone was spraying sand and you described how it looked behind the sunlight as the particulates of glass before they created a beautiful stained glass window or something. I don't know, that'd be fun. I am so tired, she moans. She begins to lean to one side, her seafoam white hair slowly falling in matted clumps over her shoulders. Sweat and seawater trickle off her body, washing lines of resentment towards the sand. I work so hard. Her shoulders droop, and if her teacher had seen her in such a defenseless state, he would have scolded her for her ineptitude. You must remain ready at all times, his voice would boom, like gravel forced at her ears. You must never show weakness or allow yourself to be caught unprepared. But Skadi simply didn't care. Enough was enough. It's never enough, she hisses through cracked lips. No matter what I do, how much I accomplish, there's always more. Her voice begins to crack as she takes several shaky breaths. There's always something I need to do, someone else's mess to clean up. Her shoulders begin to shake gently. What about what I want to do, what I need? She slowly cranes her head up and gazes out across the water, attempting to peer beyond the horizon to the only person who ever loved you. I miss you so much. She closes her eyes, allowing herself one moment of respite before glancing back down at the waves. She reaches out a shaky hand to touch the water, and almost in a cruel irony, the water recedes, as if in response before a wave laps up on the shore farther down, just out of her reach. Water begins to well up beyond her eyes. It was too much to bear. She could feel herself slipping away. You lose someone too? Skadi chokes back her tears, scrambling to her knees before clumsily retrieving her sword and wheeling around. She raises the massive weapon and nearly decapitates the nearby figure, if not for muscles being fatigued and one of her feet falling partly asleep. She raises a dirty hand to claw at her face, tearing away her weak appearance and tears with strings of her tangled hair. Before her stands a young human man who, in turn, had no appearance on his face that dictated he was in any way alarmed that a greatsword was pressed against his neck. Instead, he simply looked on, past the deadly sharp introduction, through the veil of power and the mask she wore, to the soft hurting person underneath. It was not a look of pity or concern, but of genuine intrigue and earnestness. Skadi faltered. She was unaccustomed to individuals remaining unperturbed by her presence and the wielding of her weapon, more so by the fact that he seemed less concerned by her rough exterior and seemed to peer into who she truly was, and smiled. "Who are you?" she growls in a half-attempted threat that was caught with her need to clear her throat. She composes herself, straightening her stance before speaking again. "What business do you have with me?" The boy doesn't react, only blinking slowly, as if assuring he was still cognizant, but not in any rush. "I lost someone too," he says softly, brushing past her cold remarks as he turns and faces the water. "The sea can be a terribly cold and cruel place." Skadi grits her teeth and presses her blade deeper against his neck. "You know not what you speak of," she sputters behind clenched teeth. He turns back to look at her. His eyes glassy and her bloodlust suddenly dwindles. "Don't I?" he asks, almost choking on the words. The two share a long moment as a chilling ocean breeze blows between them, and Skadi shivers uncharacteristically, perhaps in preparation to his next words. "You're beautiful." The words seem to surprise himself more than Skadi as she attempts to maintain her composure. He turns away suddenly, raising a finger to his lips, and she finally drops the sword. "What do you want?" Skadi whispers. Such a simple and innocent word somehow opened a wellspring of vast answers that neither of them realized would be so personal or lead to deeper conversation. He looks back at her and smiles awkwardly as he shifts his weight. He says, jerking his head slightly. "I don't know. Peace? Justice?" He looks down as if the sand might have the answer notated for him. He suddenly turns and looks at her, in a way that resembles him being surprised by her presence, as if their roles were reversed and he was lost in thought before realizing she was there. "To help," he simply says finally. The stupidity and naivety of what he had said, and the utter carelessness of how he said it, caused Skadi to tremble. A tremor courses through her as she was shaken to her core by what he said, and the waterworks began to act up again. "Such foolishness," she mutters, turning away from him, hoping her hair would be enough to hide her face. Skadi gathers up her sword before marching away. She slowed her escape to inspect her sword. She knew that nothing in the mortal plane could damage it, but it was always good to look over a blade before sheathing it. The main reason she busied herself with this task was that it was one of the few things that brought her peace. It allowed her a moment to take a break and admire a beautiful weapon. Apparently, it had been made by her mother from a piece of the cages that once held her father. Not that she had freed him, but a piece of his past was repurposed into something useful again. The purple light of the morning shone against the glossy blade. Its dark steel had a deep silver hue with hints of green, like seaweeds floating in the distant water. There were pock marks, like imperfections in stone, but otherwise it showed no signs of damage. Sliding it into the hard leather scabbard, Skadi takes a moment to collect herself and absorb everything that's happened. Slowly but surely, she managed to gather herself. She had a duty to do. There was always work to do. She wondered if this was going to be her life until the end of time, if she would last that long. A part of her hoped against hope that this would end. Perhaps if she had worked hard enough, after enough people were saved, that she would be able to take a break. She needed rest. She trudged through the cold sand as she made her way along the coastline. The waters were sharp and bit at her feet with a stinging cold. To anyone else, this would have been a beautiful morning with an extravagant vista, but Skadi was too exhausted to care. She was too fed up with the world to enjoy its beauty, too tired to stop and watch. She just wanted to be done. After several hours of trudging herself across the shore without any signs of civilization, Skadi started to lose what last bits of hope had remained. In a fog, she stumbled across something in the sand. Without as much of a glance, Skadi dragged her feet across the obstacle, only to realize she was no longer standing on sand. Skadi's eyes fluttered, and in the light of the sunrise she could see vague, dark shapes of scattered wood. Embedded in the surf around her was wreckage of a ship. Without much left in her system, Skadi managed to crawl inside a large section of the hull before collapsing completely. Sleep took hold of her like a massive maw, and she allowed herself to be dragged down into the dark depths of slumber. Now, part 2. Any comments so far?
That was great.
That was what?
Great.
Oh, okay. See, I feel like this middle part's pretty good. It's a little bit all over the place, but that's kind of the point. Where Scotty's meeting this guy and he keeps turning up everywhere. And it's annoying. But it's kind of a parallel to her always showing up and not interacting with anyone, but he's always showing up and he's choosing to interact with her, and that's kind of like I'm giving. Well, I'll just let the story speak for itself. Are you all right? Scotty's eyes fluttered open. She was sore from head to toe, but managed to push off the shroud of unconsciousness. She slowly turns towards the voice that called out to her. It was the same boy from earlier, the one who called her beautiful. A warm sense of frustration welled up inside her, fueling her efforts to stand. Rage was the only thing that revitalized her. "What do you want now?" she calls back, her voice cracking in pain. She struggles to rise, her limbs still partly asleep and groaning in protest upon waking. He was crouched upon a bluff of sand several feet off, peering down into the shattered hull of the ship she was laying in. "Did you have a nice rest with the fishes?" he asked with a soft smirk. Scotty simply glowered at him. "Why do you persist in pestering me?" she growls. "Just checking in on you." "And who asked you?" "Nobody. I just wanted to." His voice was calm, his stare soft and unwavering. It was as if his intentions were pure, but who could genuinely care for another person? Especially if that person wasn't even a family member, if that person was a stranger, or worse, if that person was her. Scotty bared her teeth. There was no way anyone would ever care for her. This was surely a trick. "Away from me," she barks at him. The sudden anger startled the boy, causing him to stumble back from his position. He could not understand her frustration, her rage. This infuriated Scotty even more. Not only was he meddling in affairs that weren't his responsibility, but he was performing it of his own free will. She stumbles along the lower deck, making her way out into the sunlight through a jagged crack in the hull. He was there to meet her. "At least the Dauntless is still of some use." he muses. She was tired of his riddles. Speak plainly, she orders. She struggles to raise her sword. He turns to look at her, and she tries to hide her weakness by taking a step forward to support the weight of her blade. I think my dad would hate to see this ship like this, he says softly. Skadi blinks, coming to the realization. The tip of the blade drops into the sand as she turns her head towards the shattered wood. Your father? Skadi struggles to say. Her head still ached and the words wouldn't come. She cursed herself for appearing so weak, unable to even form a single sentence. Don't worry, he offers. Skadi turns to his reassuring words. They're dead. It took her several more moments to process this information. It was as if everything he said touched her soul, but it was merely her being vulnerable. Her guard was down. She was hearing what she wanted to hear, making things up. She starts to say. Was she really about to apologize to this mortal? She clamped her teeth down, barring her tongue from reaching out to this insignificant boy. It's funny, he says, placing a hand against the H wood. I guess this place is more than one kind of resting place now. His smile was brilliant, beautiful. His hair glowed with the sun behind him. How could this person make such a joke, bring such positivity from such a tragic place? Skadi scowled at this. He was clearly a simpleton. She had defaced the resting place of his family, but it was their fault for invading the sea. It was only fair for her to take refuge in it in return. This boy, on the other hand, was making light of his deceased family. He had no respect. Without another word, Skadi turned and walked away. Hey, the boy called after her. Do you know where you're going? Skadi did not respond. She struggled to march away, dragging the sword through the sand. If you need a guide, I can... Leave me be, she orders. I have much work to do. I need to... A massive cove spread out across the shore, covered with piers and pylons and various other intricate and ramshackle structures. A veritable city strung together with slimy boards and fraying ropes stretched out across the water, connecting the various islands back to the mainland. This wharf was made of driftwood, petrified from countless ages, nailed beside fresh timber milled from the local forest nearby, and everything in between. Everything that used to be a ship made its rest here as part of the structures of this village. There are large sections of repurposed boats that sit smashed against rocks or dismantled along the piers. Rigging has turned into lashing to hold these rickety buildings together as masts lean against each other, creating tents with their sails. It was communities like these that were terrifyingly fascinating, the kind that worried Skadi, that she realized was beyond saving. There was too much work to be done here. She could not save them all by herself, and yet she would not be allowed to leave until her work was done. I think I just need to move this up here. Oop. Oops. This is one of my favorites. I like this song a lot. Skadi began her search along the shore. She gathered the attention of sailors and fishermen making their way out to sea in the early morning. That's the wrong sea. The sight of a beautiful girl who looked like she'd came from. Priceless devotion. Oops. Skadi. Fish. She gathered the attention of sailors and fishermen making their way out to the ocean in the early morning. The sight of a beautiful girl who looked like she came from the sea did more than rouse their interest. She asked if she was. Some asked if she was a herald of the tide or bore any news of. Some asked if she was a herald of the waters or bore any news of the tide. After an arduous investigation with various annoying conversations, she moved on from the shore. She didn't know how long she had spent wasting her time asking about rumors of sea monsters to slay. It was wishful thinking that her duty would be so simple. She dreaded performing any task away from the water, but she began to move inland. Most people ignored her questions, only resulting in her increased displeasure. They were more concerned with asking where her parents were or asking why she was dressed in such shoddy fashion. Certain establishments even barred her from entry, fearing her to be a homeless scavenger or an insane gypsy. Their questions were intolerable, and prude behavior disgusting. She was getting nowhere. Buildings were built into the side of cliffs and roads laid out in the natural curvature of the landscape. These people hadn't mastered the elements or tailored the terrain in any way, instead choosing to try and fit their unruly living conditions into the wild landscape. Skadi couldn't imagine how anyone would choose this sort of life. The wind blew through the jagged cracks at the base of the mountain, nearly toppling furniture in the street of kidnapping children. Hold on. Let me try that sentence again. The wind blew through the jagged cracks at the base of this mountain, nearly toppling furniture in the street or kidnapping children as it ran rampant through the streets. Birds nestled in crevices, and water trickled down stone walls, allowing moss to grow along every surface. They had taken no precautions building their city into this mountainside. These people were lawless, yet everywhere she looked, there was no one in need of divine intervention. Had she not been in such a foul mood, she might have been able to see the beauty in this place. Where nature retook old stone, she only saw negligence and maintenance. Where the earth was subdued by talented mason workers, she only saw destructive terraforming. Perhaps if she had grown up here, or had a chance to grow up anywhere, she could have learned to love a place as vibrant as this. Despite the rustic splendor of this quaint empire, her sour mood persisted. She was only here to complete a job before moving on to the next. Nothing more, no time to enjoy life and the world around her. Oh my goodness. I need so much water. I need to stop to take a sip more. Good news is that we're just about halfway through. We're almost done with this chapter, and then we'll be halfway through. Okay. She began to wander aimlessly amongst the city until she came upon a small crowd. Along the cliff edge there was a cobblestone courtyard with an immaculate view of the city on the water below. At the center was a destroyed water fountain that still managed to spray water from various parts of the broken statues. What drew Skadi's attention was not the stifled murmurs of the crowd nor the shattered architecture, but a figure that also enraptured everyone else around. A single figure danced around the mangled statue, playing an instrument Skadi didn't recognize. The way they plucked the strings felt wrong, like they were mistreating the instrument, yet it created such an enchanting sound. The way they danced around the center of the pavilion looked erratic and unpracticed, until Skadi saw the true meaning behind the movements. The way the artist moved seemed to be in time to the rhythm of the water. The random spurts and splashes of water creating a tempo that would have gone unnoticed if not for this accompaniment. I think this music is a little too powerful. Skadi wasn't sure what was more impressive, the idea that they were able to control the water and command it to their movements, or that they could move and play in time with the natural order of things. Either way, their focus was split, and their playing never faltered. It was more than just beautiful. The flow and passion, Excuse me, goodness gracious. I'm going through it this morning. The flow and the passion, it displayed something more than simple feeling, more than sight or sound. This wasn't just an enjoyable moment or of a correct sequence of notes. It went beyond what a proper performance was and became an example of what could be, what should be. This wasn't just an example of good music. This was music. This is what music was all about. It's about sharing a story, a feeling, a moment, and sharing that with others in a way that nothing else can. Music is a language understood by all, no matter who and where they are. And in that moment, all eyes were drawn, and by the time the last note was played, Skadi was simply numb. Figures applauded around her, fists raised in agreement, mouths open in complimentary cheer, hands slapped together, but Skadi couldn't hear any of it. She was stuck, the sound of silence filling her ears at the lack of the joyous tone. The music had stopped, even though time continued on. The moment had ended. She was more than dumbstruck. She had lost something she didn't know she had, till it was gone. Stop. Stop. The music stopped, I said. He smiles at her. Are you finished with your work? He asks. At first, this question confused Skadi. What could such a question possibly mean? Did he know about her mission? And how? Then her confusion turned to frustration as she realized who this was, her stunned, wide eyes blinking in confusion before narrowing in disapproval. Now that he was finished dancing around, Skadi recognized him from the boy she had met on the beach this morning. Hardly, Skadi scoffs. He tilts his head in confusion. It seems as though your paradise here is completely free of any problems. I'm going to put back on cartwheels because I like it. You piece of shit, you. Well, this music bot is ruined. Apparently you can only do 3 songs a day. And that's only if you vote. Just like every stupid piece of shit. Alright. Well, I'm just gonna play it for myself. Sorry, you all can't hear it. I wouldn't call this paradise, he says. Skadi glances at him as he rests his instrument on his shoulder. He was once again looking off into the distance as she talked to him, something else that bothered her. No place is perfect. We've all got our own share of problems. Paradise is what you make it. He turns to her with a smile. Skadi shakes her head. I have no idea what you mean, she hisses. He twists his lips and touches his chin. If you're looking for paradise, you won't find it, he explains. It's not until you find something worth fixing that you can make it what you want. If you're constantly going out into the world with preconceived ideas, you'll always be disappointed by what you find. You're speaking nonsense, Skadi mutters. She turns away from him, tired of listening to his ramblings. Maybe so, he says softly, but I'm living in paradise. Skadi turns to see him walking off with his instrument in his hands, starting to pluck at the strings again. Yeah, I'm gonna get rid of the, I didn't like the, I feel like there needs to be something here, but I'm not sure what. Just do that. I'll come back to it. You lied! Skadi screams. The ocean winds snatch away her voice as it travels across the water. She stamps her feet into the surf, splashing up sand as water washes away her tantrum. Skadi waits for a response, but the spray of the ocean wind carries no message. There isn't anything to do here. The surf curls away from her, returning to the ocean without accepting her words. You banished me to this place to punish me. Her toes dug into the wet sand. Admit it! Skadi takes several labored breaths as she struggles to contain her fury. Her throat was starting to hurt after only yelling a little bit. Skadi had never figured out what the procedure was for contacting any deities. Skadi had never figured out what the procedure was for contacting any deities, including her own father. They always reached out to her, either when they needed something or she had made another mess. She contemplated yelling again, but the unbridled use of her voice already wounded her throat, and she considered against the painful action. Finally, she decided to march into the ocean. If her father wasn't going to show up, then there was nobody to stop her. She plunges into the water, forcing herself downward into the depths. She may not know the magic her father uses to transport her across planes of existence, but she wasn't going to sit here and wait for divine intervention. She may never be able to leave this reality without him, but any place was better than here. This place was beautiful, warm, inviting, and yet she could not feel at peace here. The serenity of this place did not belong to her. She could certainly not partake in the natural healing this place had to offer, not until she was done being used. Only when her work was done could she allow herself to rest. Her descent was fueled by rage, angst, and frustration. It was unbearable to be so close to such a beautiful life and not be able to be a part of it. Arm over arm, she forced the water beneath her grasp, forcing the water behind her as she swam away from the cursed shore. She forced the waves under her reach, as if pushing the entire world behind her as she ventured out into the sea. The cerulean water rose up to curve into waves that crashed down around her. Skadi dove beneath the waves, gliding under the water's surface. The waves continued to crash down, beating the water around her, forcing her to swim deeper. The farther she got, the more difficult it became for her to move through the ocean current. The sea struggled to respond to her influence. The water became darker and more violent. She began to be buffeted more and more by the water around her, as if the sea itself had grown violent. she began to panic. These were not the waters she had known. She had grown up in a sea full of life and love, but this ocean was nearly unrecognizable. The peace and serenity had been replaced with erratic chaos. The power and massiveness of such a beloved part of her past had turned into a dark and terrifying presence that no longer recognized her and sought simply to crush and drown her. She wanted to cry, but the salt water held her tears at bay. She wanted to mourn the loss of her last comfort in the world, but fear struck her heart. The riptide tossed her asunder, the undertow unwilling to allow her to escape to the surface. She thrashed in the water, clawing at something, anything to save her. The water surged as another wave rolled in, but this momentary release of pulling force was only to slam her back down to the depths below. Skadi shuddered and shaked. Her breath was waning, and she could already feel herself slipping on the edge of unconsciousness. Part of her wanted to give up, to simply let her death be her final act of spite, but her will was too strong. Her anger against this unbehaved water outweighed her fear, but she did not know for how long. The water carried her down and down, farther into the dark waters that she could not control. Something was not right, but there was nothing she could do. Suddenly she was at the bottom. She could feel the sand in between her toes as she touched down on the ocean floor. She glanced up. At least she hoped it was up. It was so dark she could not see the sun nor the sky above. The silt that parted beneath her feet was enough to give her the strength she needed. Planting her feet firmly into the sand, she allowed herself to sink lower, tensing her whole body for this final act. The waters grew a little darker. There was something moving around her, preparing to strike, to grasp her and hold her down until her last breath faded. But she waited. With her full body crouched, like a child curled up in need of protection, she sprang forward. Kicking off the bottom, she rushed through the ocean waters before bursting through the surface. Water splashed her face as she struggled to regain her composure. She could only breathe again. But that wasn't what had gripped her so tightly. She had only been under the water for a few minutes, and yet it felt like her strength had been choking her. She paddled to the shore, collapsing in a heap as her body shivered with fatigue. She lay there, sand clinging to her features as she struggles to remember how to feel alive. She blinks away silt, coughing up grime as algae filters through her teeth. She blows away sea foam from her nostrils and struggles to regain a steady heartbeat. She lay there for who knows how long. The sun faded as the moon came and went. The warm wind on her back in the dark of night causes her muscles to spasm, remembering how to move. Her leg convulses, lashing out and kicking something rough that recoils. Skadi rolls over to look at what had struck her, only for another panic attack to set in. Fear gripped her soul as she gazed upon the massive silhouette. Without the sun and moon, the only way to see shapes was to find the parts of the sky that didn't have stars. This creature nearly blotted out her entire vision. Even in the dark, she could tell he was not happy. Out of the countless centuries I've existed, a rumbling voice calls, I have never been greeted by getting kicked. It would have been funny, but it was not funny. Skadi didn't know how to feel. Should she feel ashamed for trying to escape, for failing? Should she be angry at her father for abandoning her here, or for the countless things he hasn't told her? Except for the first time I met you. Skadi blinked. What do you mean? She asked quietly. Her father audibly smiles, but otherwise is indistinguishable from the darkness around. When your mother was pregnant with you, he explains. I pressed my cheek against her stomach only to fear that. I pressed my cheek against her stomach only to suffer a terrible strike from a young warrior. Skadi didn't know what to make of this. Was he making light of her birth? Was he saying she was always meant to be a weapon, or that she was always a pain for him to endure, even before she fully existed in this world? Was there only one thing she could There was only one thing she could wrap her mind around. Where's Mom? Skadi asked out loud. She was still struggling to breathe, let alone speak clearly. She was unsure if she was even heard, as her father took a long time to respond. She tried to collect her thoughts, to get everything back inside and learn how to control her body again. I don't know. His words were soft, yet firm. It was this simpleness that frightened Skadi more than any monster she had faced or near-death experience. Her father, an omnipotent, omnipresent being, was unsure. A being that sees and knows all didn't know something. How is that possible? Skadi asks. She could feel saliva spilling from her lips, trying to wash the sand from her mouth, causing her to splutter. That's what we're trying to find out, he says nonchalantly. Skadi looks up in the darkness, frozen with an arm wiping at her mouth. Who's we? The moment hung in the air. Nobody moved or breathed. Goodness, I need to stop myself and get a drink.
If you need to take a little break, bud, we wouldn't blame you. You've been reading.
Yeah, normally in sessions, I'm not the only one talking. But yeah, I've been talking for an hour and a half straight, basically. Yeah. I'm almost done with this chapter, and then I'll take a break. Who's we? The moment hung in the air. Nobody moved or breathed. It was as if this infinitesimal creature felt small. Skadi's arms fell to her side. The fact that her father would hesitate communicated so much more than he could say. She could feel this becoming a pivotal moment that she would remember for the rest of her life, even before anything happened. She clenches and unclenches her fists. Your sister, he says simply. Skadi is thrown back into the moment. Had she imagined the minutes that passed while she waited his answer, or had he taken such a long pause to muster the courage to say something so powerful? Skadi didn't know how to feel. He had stated it so plainly, as if it was common knowledge. Skadi whispers. She couldn't manage to say the word. For the longest time, she had been without family. The fact that she wasn't alone felt so beautiful, but was betrayed by the fact that she never knew. Your sister, he says again. She could hear his words, but they didn't make any sense. None of this would sink in. She had felt so empty, and yet she was unable to accept this into her life. This is the world she grew up in. What do you mean? We let her grow up in this world, among normal people, and have a normal life. Skadi's blood began to boil. None of this made any sense. Why was her sister kept a secret? Was it kept a secret just from Skadi, or was it from everyone? And which was worse? So why am I here? Skadi hisses between clenched teeth. A precaution, he says simply. Many worlds are under attack, and I wanted you here. Why? Skadi asked again. The question was more of a threat. The sea beast hesitates. I thought you would like it here, he says finally. I wanted you to see the place where your sister grew up. Skadi's fist tightened into balls. Why? Skadi screams. So I could see the beautiful life my sister has, but I never got to have? She could feel the tears welling up, but the salt that stung her face wouldn't let the tears spill forth. Her father looked down at her in the dark. His face was unable to read. Skadi didn't know what to make of any of this. This was a new type of psychological punishment she was incapable of handling. You will wait here, he directs, until the time is right. Skadi's shoulders shook. Every muscle in her body was tight. She could feel herself struggling to breathe. Her ears were ringing and her eyes were blurry, but she could sense her father sinking back into the ocean. His low, guttural tone was warning her about being ready, but she didn't know what for. She managed to shake herself as a gentle wave washed against her feet from her father submerging beneath the water. Enjoy your time here, was the last thing that she heard from her father. Okay. Break time.
I'm starting to realize who this is.
What do you mean?
It's what's her name, sister.
Oh, yeah. Talia's sister.
I didn't realize it was Talia's sister. I was like, huh, the god of the sea, a serpent? Sounds really familiar. I wonder who this is. Maybe I've met them or seen them.
What do
And
you
then
know
you
about
started-
Talia? Did you even
Nothing.
interact with them?
No.
Yeah.
I joined the party, Talia was there, then Talia left like after 2 sessions, and I didn't really get to meet Talia or really talk to her that much. All I
Yeah.
know is she was technically a demigod of the ocean,
Yeah.
and
She-
that I think it was her dad that contacted me to join them.
Yep. Jormungandr was basically gathering the Avengers.
Man, he pricked out of the Bolgan bin.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't have a whole lot of options.
I mean, that's fair enough. After a certain point, yeah.
Anywho. Yeah. She was playing a warlock, and I'm like, oh, that's perfect. We'll do some sea stuff. You know, this was going to be my pirate campaign. And we were weaving a really good story together, and then she just kind of stopped showing up. I don't know why. She just... It's a problem that I've really had for a long time, of just like players just ghosting me and not even explaining why or how, and then just not responding to me. Like, I understand that like
Everyone's
real
doing
life
that. I'd
exists and
probably
people
ghost
just...
you one day.
Yeah, I don't know. The most frustrating thing is not knowing, of just like people disappearing out of my life, and I have no clue why. You know, because if I knew why, then I could like change something or like be better. But like, it's so frustrating to have like people just excommunicate you and just like treat you, you know, like you're nobody, like you never existed, or just like straight up hate you and just block you and never talk to you again. And it's just like, why? If you at least tell me why you hate me, I can like do something about it. But if you just, I don't know.
You mean like how I hate Freddy?
Why do you hate Freddy?
At first it became a joke. He took it personal, and me and him started fighting, and now we just hate each other.
At least with you guys, I feel like it's banter.
I really do just dislike him at this point.
I'm sorry.
It's fine. You're not the one that I have to annoy. Freddy.
I don't think that's gonna make things better.
Who said I was planning on making things better?
Okay. But yeah. That's a real thing that I've struggled with in both online relationships and real life, is like people just up and leaving, and I don't know why. It's really frustrating.
That's never really happened to me before. There was one guy that I have known for about, say, 7 years, maybe 8. One day, he just fucking vanished. Not just from me. He didn't just like ghost me. He disappeared from everyone. Anyone that knew him, he was gone. And we haven't seen him since. It's weird. And yeah, it did hurt. I like the guy. He was awesome hanging around, but then he just disappeared.
Maybe you went
And of
into
course,
the
the most
military.
recent one would. No, he was that's military. Wait, no, he was private security. Never really sure what happened to him. Hope to see him again one day. I guess the most recent I've ever experienced what you're talking about would be with Paimon.
How so?
Well, Paimon just stopped talking to me. And he's just ghosted me ever since. The only time me and him ever talk is if we're in a call and heal. And he pretty much just ignores anything I say.
I will say that
Not-
he is pretty clueless.
Oh, I
He
know
probably
that.
doesn't even realize that he's ghosting you. Like he will forget that it's like game day, and just like, oh, sorry, I was sleeping. I'm like, okay. Like, I genuinely cannot understand how people are like, oh yeah, I didn't realize that there was this thing that we do today that we've always been doing. I just forgot about
Maybe
it.
he was just tired.
Yeah. I don't understand how people can do that.
Me neither, if I'm being honest. Because
like-
anytime it's like one of your sessions, I'm always all like, alright, next session's gonna be on this day, gotta be ready for it. Because I'm normally excited because you have amazing stories.
Well, to some people, they just live a different life, I guess, where they don't know what they're doing until the day of, and then they decide to do stuff that day. Just like the concept of planning things is completely lost on some people. It's really interesting.
I'm surprised Freddy hasn't been late more often considering he has short-term memory loss.
He's
Or was
been
it
doing a
long
whole
term?
lot better because I've been and lazy too with Paimon. I've been like messaging people of like, hey, it's several hours before the session, or like it's game day, or are you gonna make
This is
it?
your heads up.
Yeah, exactly. Specifically, Paimon did ask me to like, hey, could you give me like a couple hours heads up? And I started
Yes, he
doing it for a
forgets.
little bit, but I was like, this is too much of a commitment for me. And that was before Discord made the events thing. And I think the events help some people, but I don't know.
Oh, by the way, now that I have you, I actually wanted to give you a heads up on something
Okay.
that me and Zero were planning. So yesterday night, I found Zero and Freddy just hanging out in the Seeing Red session campaign, and I asked him if he would be interested. Wait, no, it wasn't Freddy. It was Fede. In doing something because of the fact that neither Zero or Alexander really sleep, so they'll more than likely be awake at the same time where everyone else is sleeping, and they'd be talking. I asked him if he would mind if me and him would like make up conversations that me and him had had.
That's fun.
So he agreed. So if you ever see Zero or Alexander talking about something that you don't know, it's probably one of those conversations. Just wanted to give you a heads up.
Well, I would like to be prevalent for those conversations.
Don't worry, I'll send you anything that we come up with.
Okay. Any sort of conversation that happens outside the session is not canon. Like, if you guys want to discuss stuff out of character, that's fine. And you guys can, like, roleplay as your characters or whatever. But, like, anything that is significant, I would please like it to be in the session. Not just for, like, for me, but, like, just to
Oh no,
have it
it's not gonna be
recorded.
anything like, oh, we're plotting something. It's
Well,
just gonna be
no,
like
it, like,
little questions that we would ask one another.
the whole point of, like, having these sessions is to, like, record and, like, document these interactions of these cool characters. So I would very much like to have these on record, because I think that's kind of the whole point of doing all this. You know what I mean?
That is pretty fair.
So more than just, like, me being there and knowing of it, or, like, having you give me the cliff notes, I'd like it to, you know, I want to record it. I want it to be saved so that you guys could look back on this and whatever, you know?
I think I get it.
I mean, if you disagree, that's fine. I can't stop you. These are your characters. This is just one
No,
of the
no, no,
worlds
I
that you can
agree
have your
with you.
characters in.
Man, that sounded so much like a threat when you said that.
What?
The way you said this is just one of the wards. The way I interpreted that, you're gonna be all like, "Oh, I'm gonna kill you," and you go to a different one.
No,
instead.
I'm saying that this is just one of the worlds that your character can exist in. Like, you can choose how you use them and where they talk and whatnot. Like, I'm not trying to say that. I'm just trying to say that if, like, the character conversations and development, I would very much love to see. You know, I don't want you to exclude us from that, because I think that's very fun, and I would very much like to see that, please. Like, I want to, like, when you guys are traveling back and everyone's resting up, I would love to have a scene of you guys, like, just shooting the shit, talking about stuff as you're, like, repairing him or something. I think that'd be fun. I mean, if you guys also want to just, like, hang out and do stuff outside the session, I'm not going to stop you.
I need to plan something later.
Okay.
And I still do need to talk to you about something later, but it can wait.
Okay. I think I might just use the bathroom and get back to trying to work on this. We're halfway through, so we're kind of through the good part. So this next chapter is like the problem chapter that I need to figure out. And then if I can figure out this next chapter, and this is where I'll kind of need your guys' help of, like, should I add another chapter? Should I, like, just cut it short and, like, release it? You know? But we'll see how it goes. The last chapter is my favorite, so I'll probably not even read the last chapter because I know that it's perfect. But we'll see how this next chapter goes, and then figure out if I'm gonna spend some time writing on it, and maybe I'll do that off camera or something. We'll see.
That's fair enough.
I'm gonna run to the bathroom. I'll be right back. I am hydrated.
Are you sure? You sure you're not dying?
Yep. Well, I mean, I'm dying, but it's okay.
I mean, everyone's dying.
Yep. It's the truth.
The only difference is how fast are you dying?
Life is short. We should definitely be spending as much time as we can arguing online.
You're right, we should.
Alright, back to the story. Oh, shoot, that's right. I can't use the music bot anymore. I guess that's what I'll be doing today, is finding a new music bot. Skadi woke up on the beach. Her clothes were soaked, but not from the tide. Her eyes were sore and she could barely see. The tide had fallen away in the early morning, leaving her even more alone. Her body ached and the sand burned against her skin. The soft light of early morning was blinding, singeing her entire form. She hoped it would burn her away so that she wouldn't feel this way anymore. She shook, not from cold or soreness, but from another type of pain. An agony that only comes from loss and betrayal. The realization that everything you know is false and there is no going back. Discontent rocked her soul until her heart started to slow. She wanted to die. Nothing mattered anymore. All she knew was pain, and she simply wanted it to end. She couldn't fight anymore. Her anger had dwindled. She lacked the strength to scream. She needed to get the pain out, but there was no way to expunge it from her system. She couldn't even cry. She lay motionless, like a corpse washed ashore. She wondered why she was allowed to wake, and if it was possible to sink back into unconsciousness. She pondered if it was even possible for a demigod to die, or if this was her eternal fate, perpetually stuck in between the pain of living and unending servitude with the darkness inside. Her lips dried and cracked in the sun. Her face was tormented with tickles from her frayed hair. The wind blew against her backside, torturing her with the intense heat and cold that came and went sporadically. She hated everything. How could she enjoy anything? Was this another test or punishment? A dull sound slowly entered her ears. It got louder as it got closer. The soft crunch of sand being pressed down by footfall. Something was approaching. Perhaps it would kill her, if she was lucky. A soft voice calls. Are you alright? Skadi didn't respond. For as much as both of them knew, she was simply a corpse. That's how she wanted it. To just be left alone or be put out of her misery. Skadi feels a slight touch against her shoulder, then an even stronger poke against her spine. This physical sensation was enough to help her remember how to breathe as she took a startled sniffle. Someone was poking her with a stick. She couldn't remember a time she felt so undignified except for her entire life being prodded and played with. Ow! Skadi exclaims. She stumbles onto her hands and knees. She felt her body come back to life. The numbness and sense of death she had worked so hard to accomplish was shattered with a swift kick in her rump. Oh, sorry, he says softly. She could tell he meant it. She could sense the concern and apologetic nature from his statement. Why did you kick me? Skadi asked with a gravel voice. Her throat was corroded, possibly from screaming or lack of water, perhaps both. She didn't remember what happened last night after her father left. She felt so ashamed that she simply lay there on her hands and knees, unable to move. I wasn't sure if you were dead, he states plainly, so I thought I'd check. By kicking me? Skadi hisses. It worked, he admits. Skadi blows her hair from her face, but it just swings back. Do you always sleep on the beach? She struggles to turn over, falling onto her butt as she raises a hand, scratching the hair out of her face before shielding her eyes from the sun. What's it to you? She croaks. He crouches down in front of her, casting a shadow over her. This is the second time I've found you out here, he says. Skadi groans, recognizing the young man. Are you homeless or something? Skadi thinks about it for a moment. Yeah, she says finally. I guess I am. I'm sorry, he offers. Why? Everyone needs a place to stay, to belong. Aiden can be that place for you if you want. What? Aiden, that's where you are. Okay. Skadi didn't know what to say. She rubbed her face with sand-covered hands. As she began to wake, so too did all of her pain. Aches racked her body, and she could feel herself slipping again. She didn't know who this person was, nor did she care, but she didn't want to fall apart in front of him. She could feel him move away as the sun burned her skin again, only for her to feel him plant himself down beside her. She glared across to him like a beast from behind the cave of her hands and the vines of her hair. You want some water? He asks. He wasn't even looking at her, fiddling at his waist before bringing up a flask to her cold facade. It took her a moment, but she dropped her guard, allowing her shaky fingers to cradle the bottle and fumbled with the lid. She drank from the mouth of the container, nursing the nourishing liquid that poured into her body. She could feel herself becoming revived, more than just the refreshing nature, but the natural healing it brought from her magical connection. She drank until she could feel resistance from the suction of the container, coughing as she released, only to continue drinking. The entire time he simply sat in silence, waiting for her to finish. She swallowed every last drop. It wasn't until she craned her neck back until she felt her spine hurt did she realize what she had done. She opens her eyes to look at the empty container. She glances at him, handing the flask back to him. She struggled to say anything, an apology or thanks, but his deadpan expression stopped her. He simply took the bottle without a word or expression, as if he hadn't done this out of compassion or was surprised or angry with her in any way. It was almost as if, "This doesn't mean anything to you," Skadi whispers. He glances at her, eyebrows slightly raised. "What?" he asks, genuinely seemed like he didn't hear her. "Why did you help me?" she asks. "Why do you care?" His brow furrows, puzzled by this. "Why not?" he responds. He leans back, planting his arms in the sand behind him to prop himself up. "I can't offer you anything," she says softly. Skadi's eyes stared daggers into the sand, trying to make sense of this. She softened her gaze to look at him, all the while he was simply looking at her. "I didn't ask for anything." "Then why help people?" This seemed to get a response from him. He sits up, looking intently into her eyes. "You don't help people because you can get anything out of it," he says firmly. "You do it because it's the right thing to do." Their eyes locked for a long time. "If someone is able to, of course." Skadi shook her head and turned away. She didn't understand. They sat there together in silence as the sun rose. Skadi pondered for a long time, trying to make sense of things. Meanwhile, the world continued to move around her. The tide slowly started to make its advance and retreat, gaining ground with every attack until the water licked at her toes. "Are you cold?" he asked quietly. She glances at him. "It looks like you lost your shoes." He nods towards her feet. She glances at her legs. "I don't have shoes," she says softly. "Oh, right," he whispers apologetically. "Homeless. He turns away from her, as if that was it, but Skadi turns to him in kind. "Why are you talking to me?" she asks. He glances at her. "Is that a crime?" he asks. His humor was lost on her. She wraps her arms around her knees, pulling her feet in from the rising water. "You don't know me." "That's how you get to know people, though." Skadi turns to give him the most disgusted face. He looks surprised at how appalled she was by his statement. The water rushes up again and retreats. The water rushes up again and he retreats, standing to his feet beside her, but refusing to simply leave. "I know I'm just a stranger," he starts, "but sometimes those are the best people to talk to." He pauses, as if waiting for her to scold him again. When he receives no response, he continues, "Strangers are people whose opinions don't matter. You can talk to them about anything. Talk about all sorts of stuff, and it really doesn't matter." She begins to slowly turn towards him. "They're not going to have any bias because they don't know anything about you and you're not going to see them again." She stares at him, deeply, intently, as if attempting the same gaze he gave her, trying to pierce into him and learn his true intentions. He chews his lip a moment before smiling again. "And if you ever do see each other again, you're no longer strangers." She thought for a moment. She struggled to understand this person, his genuine nature and honest intentions. "How much are you willing to hear?" she asks. His smile melts into a serious slash across his face. "Tell me everything." "So, what happened to your mom?" he asked, surprisingly. Surprisingly, Skadi wasn't getting annoyed by his constant questions. It was as if she was just continuing to spill everything and he was only prompting her. This way it didn't feel so forced or one-sided, an illusion of a conversation. "She disappeared," Skadi says. She considered saying, "It's complicated," and leaving it at that. "At least, that's what I've been told." It was strange talking to him like this, saying these things aloud, telling him wasn't going to do anything. He couldn't help her, and only repeating what she already knew didn't do anything either. "That's how stories go," he says, finally contributing to the conversation. "Somebody's always got a tale to tell." He stares out across the vibrant water and throws a stone into the murky depths. "There's more than one side to every story, and unfortunately, we always believe whichever one we're told first." They sit in silence for several long moments that are as painful as the seconds getting stretched. Skadi looks out across the water to the horizon, the midday sun casting illuminated ripples across the dancing water. "My father told me she ran away," Skadi whispers, "and every time I asked, he tried to explain that it wasn't because she hated me or him." Skadi grips the sand beside her. "But he never told me about her." Skadi grips her teeth. Not grips, grits. And as if in response, the boy sitting a few feet away spreads out his legs and leans back. "What was your sister told?" he asks. Skadi pauses before turning to him. "Do you think your sister had a choice? Have you even asked her?" "What are you playing at?" Skadi asks between clenched teeth. She reaches for the handle of her sheath before remembering that her blade was not in it. She turns and looks at her sword buried in the sand several feet away, the waves washing up closer and closer as the night falls. "Your mom left because of your sister," he says slowly. "That's why you blame your sister. But she didn't get a choice either, right?" Scotty goes to stand up, but he scrambles up faster. She glares at him, but he stands firm, holding her gaze. Did you ever think about her position? She never had any family. She didn't steal your mom away. She probably didn't even have a dad. Scotty goes to shake her head, but something stops her. This deep resentment holds fast inside her rather than welling up. Have you even talked to her? Scotty trails off, the realization stuck in her gut like a knife buried to the hilt. He steps back slightly before taking a shaky breath. You hold your sister responsible for what happened, he says. But do you even know if it's true? He stands there in the least offensive stance, and yet Scotty, for perhaps the first time in her life, felt threatened. What can I do? The way I see it, you got two options, he states firmly. If you try to make amends and she pushes you away, then your feelings will be validated. Or she may accept you and then you two can be happy together. But you need to talk to her. At least try to relate to her. You owe her that much. He stares at her intently. She's family. Scotty closes her eyes, allowing the cold breeze to blow through her. She lets the ocean air wash over her, attempting to wipe away the hurt that stained her heart. But there was nothing she could do. Something deep inside her couldn't let it go. The pain wouldn't go away. She slowly shakes her head. Tomorrow is a new day, he says reassuringly. Think about it. But Scotty wasn't listening anymore. She steps across the wet sand, daring the water to touch her as she retrieves her sword, allowing the water to return once she is gone. Without another word, she turns and begins walking away. See you later, I guess. To this, she responds. No. Huh? I don't think so. I'm sorry. I don't know what you're talking about. Scotty takes a strained breath and sighs. I don't believe we will be seeing each other again. Her words were cold, remorseless, stated as fact, and not offered as a conversational statement. The distant tone in her voice was emboldened by her unwillingness to even turn to face him as she said her final words. Goodbye. And with that, she once again began to walk along the coastline, the surf washing away her footprints, leaving nothing behind. So, this is the chapter that I need help with. Because part of what made Scotty's character is that when we first met her in the campaign, she came up out of the ocean and immediately attacked Talia. But it was like this kind of aggression that
Sounds
I wanted to
about
have a
right.
story behind. And so that's why whenever, like, at the beginning or end of a session, I always, like, cut over to, like, what is Skadi doing? And, you know, who is she talking about? And that's where all of these scenes came from, is that, like, she was either, you know, fighting something or just, like, angry, you know, talking to this guy, kind of explaining her story. And so that's basically all that this chapter is like the story behind who Skadi is. So this entire like novel basically came from this one chapter. And so I'm trying to figure out if I need to like restructure this chapter and like change things, because she's gone through a little bit at this point, and I'm just trying to figure out if like the character choice of her like not accepting her sister makes sense. I also don't know if I want to put in earlier the scene of her like meeting her sister and fighting her. I almost feel like it's better to not have Talia in this story, just because I want to have like no significant characters. Like even her father is like non-existent in this story, and that's kind of the point. That it's literally just Skadi going in this world trying to figure it out, and then there's this guy, and he's not important. He's not important at all. I don't even give him a name because he's not that important. The point is that he's literally just like a point of reference, or maybe like an audience surrogate for like viewing who Scotty is and like asking the real questions.
Wait, that's not the guy we met when we saw Talia and Ho fighting in
It
the
is
ocean
likely
and then
to.
the crabs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that is the guy.
it is him.
That's the guy?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's the one that got sick, and he owned the boat that you guys raced with.
He is. What is his name?
I remember giving him a name briefly just so you guys had something to call him in the story.
Yeah,
But
but
I'm specifically leaving it out of this book because I don't feel like it's important.
my.
Because
I
to
think
Scotty's
he-
perspective, he's just some boy.
I think that you should give a name, because if this is going to turn out how it end up in the session,
Also,
they are
welcome,
going to get
Dino.
what? They're going to get close. So I think that him like revealing his name is something that's going to show up in the future, like in the end.
Well, here's the thing: is that she never speaks to him again after this.
Oh,
Yeah, this is literally where the story ends, and then she goes and confronts the elements in this last chapter. And I don't really want to go into it too much because I don't want to. I don't want to explain the rest of the story. I'm just trying to ask if this makes sense of everything that you've experienced about these characters so far. Does this chapter make
yes.
sense?
I think that the only thing that bugs me is when this boy confronts her. She's kind of on like the balance. Like, should I talk to her? Should I go after my sister? And I think that it's a little bit sudden. It needs a little bit more
Yeah, because I
confrontation
basically
on her
started
head.
at this point and then I worked backwards. Like
Yeah.
I built stuff in front of this, so now I feel like I need to restructure this. I think it should be less about like her confronting her sister and being more about like because even the thing of like you only believe the story that you hear first, like that doesn't really make sense now. Like she's struggling to find her will to live right now, so
Yeah.
I don't really understand the like reason why she's still angry or whatnot. Like it doesn't make sense at this point, which is why I'm thinking about redoing this. She tells a story about her mom, but she's
I
like,
think that's-
I can't fall in love with Aiden. I can't live in this place. This is my sister's place, and I can't enjoy it or whatnot.
I think something that could be interesting is him saying, "Oh, you should go after your sister," and she just distorts it on going on a aggressive way instead of like trying to clarify things. Because everything that she knows is basically battle so far, right? And her dad doesn't know how to be a dad, being really honest.
Mhm.
So I think that her misinterpreting that or twisting it would be interesting, because it went from like sad and a little bit depressed to like anger from it went from like 0 to 100 really fast. That's what I think.
Yeah, like this was the old Scotty in this chapter, and I feel like she's gone through some character development in the previous chapters, so now this doesn't really make sense anymore. Like she's gone from being like an angry person in the first chapter to being like a confused person in the second chapter, and then she went straight into depression, uh, and now that she's like going straight back to like, I'm not going to listen to you and talk to you anymore, it just doesn't make any sense, and so that's why I'm thinking about changing it. Um, and that's why I'm
Some
thinking about taking this stuff and throwing it up there, because basically chapter 4 is just a couple of things that I have that I want to like put in, but I'm not sure how or where.
mm, I mean, you can keep it with the going from the depression to anger. I just think that it needs a little bit of tweaking there. Tweaking there. For example, one thing that I relate to is in the beginning when her father says something like, "Oh, I'm not angry at you because you don't master your skill. I'm angry because you lied to," and she's angry because he has a point. Like bringing this thing, like he's not completely wrong, even though you're mad about it. It's something that usually makes me even more mad. And later I figured out, yeah, it was a bad idea.
Hmm. I did have something where um let's see. I might have deleted it. Um yeah, I think I deleted it. But it's basically her father comes back and like he attacks a boat and makes people suffer because he basically comes back as the king of the undertow, and I'm like, I don't understand why you're causing these people problems, like why are you making them suffer? And he's like, that's what you have to do in order to like get people to work together, is that you have to give them a common goal. And it was just like, it didn't really make sense because I think at this point I think her father is like gone and whatnot, because it definitely, it harkens back to the previous chapter where enjoy your time here was the last thing she heard from her father, and that's just like true for the rest of the book, is that that was the last thing she ever heard. So those were his final words to her, and I kind of like that and leaving it at that, because in the campaign like he did a lot, and he was a king of undertow and there was this whole thing, and it was like it was important and it's relevant to the campaign, but I almost feel like at this point this story is no longer parallel with the campaign. I just think that there's too much stuff that's different, and that's why I'm almost thinking about removing the concept of her sister entirely. But or at least leaving out them like interacting at the very least. I don't want to introduce Talia to the story at all. I just want there to be that Scotty has a sister, and then she's kind of
Yeah, that's
struggling
what
with
I
that.
thought we were going for.
Yeah. I just want to, again, a lot of these ideas are very vague and open ended. And that's kind of the point, is that there's a lot of information that we don't know, and we're just seeing Scotty jump to these conclusions and like making assumptions and thinking that the world is nothing but pain and frustration and is out to cause her problems. But yeah. Um I think that's why I did delete that scene of like her father coming back and like it, because it could have been like this whole thing, but it felt like I was just padding out the story with like another scene of like her father being like, this is what it means to be a god, this is what you have to do to mortals, and I'm just like, this is a whole lot of like existential stuff that isn't relevant to Scotty's development and character growth. And I think that's why I ultimately decided to remove it, because while it would have been good to the story and, you know, led to some other things, I feel like we needed to just really hone in on Scotty and her character development, which is why I ultimately decided to scrap it.
Yeah, I think that if you wanted to do something like, oh, the humans that are only strong and we are working towards the same goal, it would be somewhere around the fourth part when she's asking him, like, why should I help them? If you want to put it there.
Let's see. Yeah, I think like I need to adjust this whole thing. What are you playing at? Your mom left because your sister.
Yeah. Yeah.
Believe in that story.
Yeah.
Yes.
When your book is done, I practice acting.
Say that again. You cut out.
When your book is done, can I practice my voice acting on it?
On my book.
I think she wants to read your book.
I mean, you can practice your voice acting on anything. It doesn't have to be just my book.
I know, but it sounds fun.
Okay.
Nice, you know?
Which is why I'm thinking about taking some of these excerpts from chapter 4 and just deleting chapter 4 and putting it up in chapter 3, because I feel like it does go on for a little bit, but I feel like it's this conversation on the beach that we need to get some definition to who Skadi is now and what she's going to be. And I just don't think we get that character development of like, she's lost, she doesn't know what to do, she's just kind of talking, you know, in the same way that I relate to like, I don't understand therapy, it's just me talking about stuff. It doesn't help me work through anything. It's just me telling my story to someone else and then them not giving any feedback, and they're just like, well, how does that make you feel? I'm like, well, considering that I just took a couple hours talking about something, my throat feels a bit hoarse, but other than that, I don't feel any different. And they're like,
Yeah.
okay. I'm just like, what do you mean, okay? Like, you're
Therapy
supposed to be a
worked
therapist.
for me like that, like 10 years ago. But recently, when I come back, I end up finding out there are like multiple like lines of work that you can take. And the one that I took is like behavior or something. I forgot what it's called exactly, but it's like help you to create new behaviors to fix your own problems. So it's more like creating tools, utility belt, so you can put your life in order. And that's what I've been doing for the last like 2 years.
Mm.
I remember going to therapy. It was interesting.
I remember going to therapy a couple different times, and basically what it boiled down to was, you know, a person that doesn't know anything about me trying to be like, hey, tell me as much about you and your problems as quickly as possible. And I'm like, that's gonna take a lot, but I'll try. And then it basically was like, well, that's all our time. Please come back next week so that you can tell me more about your story, because I can't really help you yet until you tell me more. But basically, the idea behind therapy is that like when you break it down and try to describe it in your own words, you're like, well, I'm upset because this, and this. And so, like, when you say it out loud, people are like, oh, well, then those are the things that you're addressed because that's how your brain identifies as, like, those are your problems. I'm like, I get that. But to me, like, if I knew what the problem was, I'd be able to take care of it, you know?
If I knew the problem, I wouldn't be here now, would I?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, this and maybe I just need to get rid of this, but I like it so much that I want to keep it, but I feel like I just need to change it.
Yeah,
Anywho,
I
let
think you
me
should.
read some of these things and we'll see if we can't, like, I don't know, maybe sparse them together or something.
Come on, we have two smart people and then me, an idiot. We can do
So
it.
what
I've just
I
got
was
like
thinking,
two pages. This will be real quick. But go ahead.
what I was thinking, you said that she never come back to speak with this guy with no name, right?
Do you think
Yeah,
I
that's
And
what
should
he
give
said.
him a name?
yeah, I think once again, I think that this of her finding like her paradise and finding like meaning and the thing that she couldn't find,
There's no
like
such thing as
wouldn't
paradise,
bother
only
about,
death.
would be interesting. So like it's a random guy, it's just a moral. But once I think that it's interesting like for her progression as a character. But I think that it's also interesting if you keep that we are not going to talk again. But she comes back, talk with him, but now since she is evolved and it's a new person, that line kind of still stay true.
Hmm. The point I'm trying to make is that it's not because this guy is so caring and thoughtful and like special that she's able to bond with him. It's literally that he is a normal person and she's the first person that she's just allowed to treat as like someone that isn't out to get her, basically. Because she's always had this negative perspective, uh,
Yeah, no, I get it.
what's antagonistic.
She's pretty much always had her guard up.
Yeah, I understand that, but I think that the fact that she starts acknowledging him by his name or stuff like that instead of just referring it you or moral, it's something that, you know, from like a
I see what you're
demigod,
saying. Yeah.
like seeing someone that would be like so humble on the same level would be interesting.
I feel like I need to paint it in a light of like her as a deity going out of her way to ask, what's your name and what's your story when no other deity has done that for her. Like
Yeah,
I wanna paint it in a light of like more than just being able to, go past her own issues. She's not going to respond in the same way that everyone else is. She's going to take that pain and make sure that nobody else suffers the same situation of like being better, basically.
and I think that this idea brings that even though that she would be like holy in the Tao, but that's sad, and she only finds happiness when she basically put those things aside and is just like a regular person, quote unquote.
I'm just gonna write down here in the notes. Because
Uh,
this final chapter is her like throwing away her sword, and like confronting the darkness that's in the waters because you know her mom is now gone, so that's why the ocean isn't welcome to her anymore, and her father is also gone, so he's not there to save her, and that's kind of the
and she
story as
never
to what
was
that
able
is.
to like face the depths, right?
Well, that's what she does in the final chapter. is that she faces the depths.
Yeah, but before that, she was never able to do that, and now
Correct.
that, yeah, yeah,
Because in the
it's
first chapter you saw that she could swim because she could do that naturally. She never learned how to breathe because she just struggled in that way. But then in the previous chapter we just saw her try to swim again, but that warmth of her mother is completely gone, and it's just water at this point. It's not the ocean anymore. It's just water, and the water suffocates her. So now she's like on land trying to figure out what to do, who she is, She's so disconnected from everything, and it's at that base level that she's able to talk to this guy and figure out what to do. And that's what I was trying to go for here in this chapter, and I don't think I like quite got that, which is why I think I need to, rather than like ending it there where she like walks away nonchalantly being the same person again, we need to take this stuff and throw it back up in there and actually give her some character development.
yeah.
We need some character development.
Yeah.
I mean, for what I see, this point is like her lowest point, like the end of the second act. Like the ocean doesn't do her will like it used to. Now she's being back against the wall because this guy's like confronting all that she knew basically about her own story.
Like everything that she knew was wrong, or
Yeah, that everything that she knew could be wrong. Like she thinks that her mother left because of her sister, but now she's like maybe she didn't have a choice. Maybe she doesn't even know. She didn't have a friend, and now how this like preconception that she had of the world is gone, and now she really doesn't have anything. Right? When you're, you know, I forgot what is the expression, but when you're in the bottom of the pit, the only way that you can go is up.
I'm trying to remember how to do a strike through.
I'll be right back.
Okay. How do you do a strike through? Oh, I just have to go. Okay. Oh, come on. Format. There it is. Okay. So rather than it being about like what was your sister told, it's the story of like, why do you always assume everyone is your enemy? Kind of thing. I think that's what it needs to be instead. And I'll highlight that. Let's see. That's how stories go. So what happened to your mom? I mean, this could also be redone. Hmm. Yeah, the hurt that's in her heart, she couldn't let it go. I think she should let it go. I think that's what needs to happen. I think it shouldn't be about her sister. I think it should be about her. Let's see.
When you did tell us, you did say this was gonna be about. So I agree.
About what?
When you were telling us what the story is about, you did mainly say it was about an NPC that you liked. So it should mainly be about her, not the sister.
Yeah, this is Skadi's story. This is about the story that we didn't get to see in the campaign. This is all about
This is
her, yeah.
in the end, yeah. It should mainly be about her.
Which is also why I kind of want to leave this guy kind of out of it. But we'll see. Because we don't want to, like... It's not about his reactions. He is a mirror, and we get to see her actions bounced off of him. And how, like, the way that the gods treat her reflects on how he treats, or how she treats him. But he doesn't respond the same way that she does. And I think she needs to see that, if anything. But it's not about because he's special. It's about what she experiences. Anywho, let me read some of this and see if any of it can be useful. Because I might need to just delete this and just restructure everything up here. But I want to see if any of this is useful.
Take your time, Boardman. I'll be plotting your demise in the background.
And these are just some random things that aren't even connected to anything, so we'll just see. Why are you always following me around? First of all, I don't, he explains. If anything, you find me... Ooh, I didn't start with a... quotes. If anything, you find me more often than I stumble into you. She takes a step towards him, and he raises his hands defensively. I suppose we're just at the right place at the right time. Right, she scoffs. She stands tall to be intimidating, crossing her arms and staring at him. As if fate was a real thing. She blows some hair out of her face before the wind knocks it right back. What would you call it? He asks. She glares at him. Insubordination. I don't work for you. Neither am I trying to stop you. Sabotage. I'm not trying to ruin whatever you're trying to do here. Then what are you trying to do? He tosses his shoulders. Help, he says honestly, offering his palms. I guess. Help, Skadi mumbles. He shrugs. Unlikely. And then I was gonna go into this whole thing of like, you help, meanwhile, she's forced here to help, and like, then it kind of goes into like, you like serving people? Skadi asks. It would be an honor to serve people, he says. I'm not just talking about a good deed as its own reward. That basically means that doing the right thing should be expected, and your reward is knowing you're a good person. He turns and walks through the shafts of sunlight as the dust floats through the air. I'm talking about actually helping people, making them happy. There's nothing better than seeing a smile on someone's face and knowing that you put it there. There are a lot of people out there that don't have it very good. I, for one, know because I grew up with very little. I don't want people to suffer through what I did. That's why I make it my goal to try and help people as much as I can. Not because it makes me a good person or because I know I'll get some sort of reward. He stops and turns, smiling gently. I just want to help. And this is like explaining motivation behind who he is and why he's doing what he's doing. And that's why I wanted to cut it out, because even though it's cool and it's moving, I'm trying to not shift the focus off of Skadi. I'm not trying to say that he's in this journey with her. He already succeeded before her and he's teaching her how to do it right.
He's like the opposite of her.
Right, and that's what I'm trying not to do. I'm trying not to provoke that he's like the yin to her yang, that he like completes her or like helps her learn better. I'm trying to make him as just a blank canvas for her to like see her own faults and failings. not for him to be like, oh, here are the good things that you should be doing instead. I think that's why I cut this out, because even though I like this, and I think that this is perfect explanation for who his character is, I don't want to turn the attention away from Skadi. What do you guys think? Do you think it's something I should keep, or do you think it's worth throwing into some of the conversation where she's like confused and angry of like, I've been my entire life helping other people, how can you like to do something like that? But she's always, seen it as, a chore or something to do.
Yeah, I think that it works. I would add something like, this is an endless chore. Why would you serve someone? But when he's going about his rant about, oh, I didn't grow up with a lot of things, you cut that short. Like, some people don't have good, and many people grow with very little. And she basically implies, like, you probably know how that is. And let she reach her own conclusions. Like, he's not like doing it, he's not saying it out loud, but he's just like nudging her into this direction.
But I don't want there to be any nudging. Maybe I just kind of want to show that there is like another option to like just hating work, I suppose. I don't know. Because I don't want her to like adopt his motivations and that's like her solution. I don't know. Let me come back to that. Let me read this next part. Skadi couldn't understand this fool. I'm not a hero, Skadi says. I don't think you get to decide that, he responds. She turns and looks at him. A hero isn't a job that you can apply for. There's nothing you can do to warrant you to claim such a title. It's something that only other people call you. She stares long and hard at him, the confusion riddled across her face. What are you talking about? She asks. He steps closer to her, his face calm and collected, letting her know that he's serious. You don't get to decide how other people see you, he explains. There's nothing you can do to earn respect and favor. You just have to put yourself out there and people will eventually form their own opinions about you. Skadi throws up her hands. Then what am I supposed to do? She asks angrily. If I do nothing, I fail. If I do everything, I fail. There's no way to win. She turns away from him, crossing her arms. She closes her eyes, taking a deep breath and struggling to keep it all in. He waits several moments as the tension dies down before speaking again. I agree, he says softly. You can work really hard, but it means nothing if you're not doing it for the right reasons. She glances over her shoulder at him, and he stops his progress towards her. But, like I said, there's nothing you can do to be a hero. It's something you become. You embody a concept. You represent an idea. She glares at him, wondering how long he's going to blather on. You show people what it means to be something more than what they are, what they could be. Being a hero doesn't mean you are perfect or that you save people. You are a symbol. You give people hope. I don't understand, Skadi says slowly. They stare at each other intently. You don't have to. What am I doing wrong? You don't have to do anything. Then why am I here? What's the point of all of this if I don't matter? That's the question, isn't it? He asked rhetorically. His arms fall to his side and his face is deadpan, an unreadable mask. Why do we struggle so hard if our fates are already determined? She furrows her brow. What are you talking about? She shakes her head. I don't know, he admits. But you are here for a reason. You were given a purpose. And the more you struggle trying to do something else, the more you're just gonna wear yourself out. He turns and starts to leave. Skadi struggles to race to him, to grab hold of the only person who speaks any sort of clarity in her life. She wanted to know more about him, about what he sees in her. But that wasn't fair. He was only a boy, just another person like her. She had her own problems just as he had his. She just watched as he slowly walked away from that place into the dark of the night. So this was like a reverse option that I had to like her walking away from the conversation in the previous chapter was him like explaining a different ending and then him walking away and leaving her. And no matter what, the final chapter needs to be Skadi alone doing this thing. So, some way or another, one of them needs to walk away. And I liked it better that Skadi was walking away from him, because the point is that she is always abandoning the worlds rather than the world abandoning her. She just feels that way, and so that she's putting herself in that situation. So I feel like no matter what, it needs to be her walking away from him, not the other way around. No. But then it's also, it's Alt Shift. Okay. We need to decide whether or not the character development moves in that direction, you know, of if she changes or whatnot. And again, it's this thing that I feel like he's talking too much and telling her these like, oh, life is beautiful, life is great, but she just doesn't get it. So it needs to be her coming to the conclusion rather than him telling her. You know what I mean? So that's why I'm kind of struggling with this. But I will say that your feedback has definitely helped, because not only do I need like the help of like, how does this come across when I do this or that, but also having you guys understand like the process of this character and her development is important.
Yeah, because you're like, oh, but she might not change, but that wouldn't be satisfying, right?
Right. Well, she definitely does change, but it's the reason
she grows
why.
from it. But when you're like, oh, she won't gonna change. That's like, imagine having a story where you have like an asshole as a main character and he keeps being an asshole until the very end and nothing changed.
Right. I think that's why people didn't like Skadi when I introduced her in the campaign. I'm like, well, there's a reason for that, but nobody cared enough to like understand her anymore. And I think that's why I like really fell in love with this character and started writing these stories. That like, even though the party didn't get to see them, I wanted to introduce these little stories and tidbits, which I did as like cliffhangers at like the end of the session or something, that I purposely enjoyed, but I feel like everyone else was just kind of zoning out of like, all right, when's it my turn to play? So I stopped doing them.
I can understand when someone just doesn't care about the Kyoto and, just looks at it one way.
Well, also, if you guys were going to show up to a session and it started or ended with me being like, anyway, here's a story about my character and a story that I did or whatnot, like, you guys are just waiting for your turn to play. I just don't think that's fair. It's one thing for me to, like, describe the situation that I'm going to put your characters into, but if I'm just, like, making you sit as a captive audience about a different story, about some different characters doing different things that has nothing to do with what you are doing, then that's not fun or fair to you guys.
I mean, it can be, For
To me,
example,
that sounds amazing because I love when a story does that. Even if it does take time, I love when a story will fucking flesh out something that I don't know or understand yet.
And that's like why you're one of my favorite players, because you actually know what I'm doing and where I'm going with something.
so I was playing a campaign with a group of friends here in Brazil, and it was really funny because
Wait,
like
you're
in
in
the first,
Brazil?
yes, I am Brazilian.
I had no fucking idea. Anyways, continue.
So one of the NPCs was like basically a Starbucks attendant or something, and this woman was like hired to go into a dungeon, and basically her entire party dies. And in the end of the session, it's just like her crawling out of like the dirt, like I am a survivor, and she became like a major NPC on the campaign. Like every so often we just like pin up to her, and she's like going through his like crazy change to become a crazy warrior. It's really funny.
Not gonna lie, that's actually an interesting way to put someone being the only person that survives. They decide, oh, I survived. I'm gonna become really fucking strong now because I managed to survive.
No, it was kind of like this and like a lot of drama. Like I'm a survivor. I'm a survivor. I'm going to. I am a survivor.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. They're traumatized, and the way they did it is, I'm going to survive. The only way really for me to survive is I gotta get better. I gotta get stronger. I must survive. Instead of the whole I survived, I'm quitting thing that normally goes around.
Yeah.
Holy shit, I survived. That's amazing. I'm gonna quit now that I survived this.
I survived. I'm never doing that again.
Pretty much. I hate when everyone does that with the whole I survived, but now I'm gonna quit. I want to see more I survived. I'm traumatized and I really just want to keep surviving. But then again, I can always see that some people want the character to be specific. Oh, I survived. I somehow survived this. I never want to do that again. It's always nice to see how certain people will do with the characters, or how a character will interact with a different character. It's simply the way I enjoy watching stuff and enjoying it. Sure, a lot of people might not think the same way as I do, but hey, if I like it, I don't care.
I think that's why I struggled with this story for so long, because I'm like, this is a character that I like and I enjoy, and I don't know how to like represent them in a way that I think other people would like them. Because I feel like anyone who starts the story just sees them as like annoying and like, you know, so angry or whatever. And why would they care about their story or anything that happens to them?
Yeah, Sparrow, that's pretty much how it will go. You have to make them kill. Get them connected to them somehow. Even if it doesn't involve the kill the person's playing as, you can always make someone care about someone.
And I just don't know how I can do that.
You're a smart board, Sparrow. You figure it out one day.
I legitimately don't know if I can do that with this story. Because I feel like we're just watching this person struggle and then it just kind of ends. Because I could go for like another 20 chapters, but I think I need to limit it to these 5. And again, I think I should clip out the stuff in this 4th chapter and just make it, 4 chapters. Make the 5th chapter just the 4th chapter.
It's basically 4.5.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. I think I need to take some time and like try and work this in, but I do appreciate you guys for being here. But I think I kind of need a break a little bit, maybe. Because what I want to do is maybe reread this and be like, Aiden, you know. Yeah, because she's just like, Aiden, that's where you are. And she's just like, okay. I feel like I could definitely insert something here. And there was something else that I, like, poked at. It was like, I think I can add something here, too. Where she's just like, she don't understand, and then they sat in silence. I feel like there could be a little bit more conversation here that I might take something from down here and put up here. Because she wakes up from being like super depressed and abandoned by her father, and she's just like, suffer, this is, you know, your life. You have a sister, whatever. You know.
My father really did deserve that honor.
Yeah. Well, he didn't want to keep lying to her anymore, or like holding it.
That's
from
fair.
her. But he also doesn't know like the right way to say it. And again, something that we don't know in the story is the motivations behind why her father is doing what he's doing and acting the way he is. But basically, for those of you, well, both of you were in the campaign, but basically the world was getting deleted, you know, and there's like this whole time paradox thing happening. So that's why all the deities are disappearing, and he is the last one to go.
What about the mom that we saw that was stuck in the
Yeah, she's
place where we
outside time.
She was the first to go. And that's why things started to unravel. Do you guys actually remember how that campaign ended? It was so beautiful and I loved it so much.
we killed that one guy, and we basically had a choice. We could have taken the place and basically did the time thing, or we could have gone back to our time.
Right.
That's the way I remember it.
I
I remember I
what
had
his-
Havelock. I couldn't stay for the entire thing because I was incredibly busy.
What's his name? Ozymandias? The guy who...
Yeah.
He was possessing... What is his name? Connor?
Mm-hmm. Well, Connor was an abstraction
Player.
from Ozymandias.
Oh.
Basically, Ozymandias was Connor and Connor was Ozymandias. They were people from... basically, the story is that, like, Connor was a nobody and he died, but instead of straight up dying, the gods, like, gave him powers and made him a watcher. And then he saw all this stuff and he's like, you know, all these watchers before me haven't done anything. I need to try and do something. And so
It's because you're a watcher. You're not supposed to do anything.
he moved himself to the end of time where nobody could perceive him because there's nothing there. And in doing so, that made an opening, so they needed another watcher. And that's what they did with Tinker Dan, is that they made Tinker Dan a watcher. And that's why he
Tinker
kind
Dan?
of disappeared.
He's
Well,
alive?
He left the campaign because he was kind of bored with it, but I made that the head canon that he was taken to be a watcher.
I mean, he was incredibly powerful. It makes sense.
Anywho, this guy was trying to do some stuff with like changing how fate was written and messing with some stuff, and that was causing some problems, and that was causing the corruption in the root of the Earth Tree, because he was trying to remake the worlds in a way that he thought would better with subtle tinkering. But it shifted the whole balance of everything, because he's like, it shouldn't be a single tree with like a solid trunk and it's only supporting these worlds. It should be like a moss. It should be, you know, an ever growing and ever flowing thing, like vines. You know, it should just constantly be growing, making new worlds, supporting new worlds, and it should just be random and chaotic in the way that it naturally should be. There shouldn't be
So
order
he
to this.
wanted the infinite universe, pretty much.
Yeah.
He wanted that.
Exactly. He wanted the infinite branches, basically. He's like, it doesn't matter if we can't support them or if we can't manage them, if we don't have enough deities to take care of everything. We shouldn't prune it. We shouldn't like manage it to be in these specific things that we designed them to be. That's not right.
Man was out here being Loki before he even came out.
Exactly. But yeah, that's their motivation. But they fell in love with Calypso, the ocean woman, which is Talia and Skadi's mother. And she decided to join him at the end of time. And he's like, you can't stay here. You can't come visiting me. They'll either find us or whatnot. She didn't know that he loved her, but she wanted to help him. She didn't want him to be alone. And so that's why she eventually agreed to allow him to kidnap her and erase her memories. Because she wanted to have a daughter that was free from like the corruption and tyranny of the gods, because she kind of understood where she was coming from. So she had Skadi and she became a demigod, and she's like, oh well, you have powers and you have responsibilities, so you have to do a bunch of work. And so that's why when she had her second daughter, Talia, she didn't tell anybody. She let Talia grow up amongst humans and discover her powers normally. And her father would come and visit her occasionally, but he's everywhere. So that's why he can show up, because he's technically everywhere all at once anyways. So
he is the ocean.
Correct. So his movement is not, noticeable. It's not like if the moon were suddenly to like come land at a specific spot and visit someone, It's not as noticeable because he's omnipresent. So that's why he was able to come visit Talia and Skadi and all this stuff and whatnot. But she knew that if she were to interact with her daughters, that they would know about Talia, and so that's why she decided to hide away, so that she wouldn't be captured and she wouldn't be questioned about, having another daughter. And so that's why she hid away, to keep Talia a secret. And it's again this whole thing of like, I need you to erase my memory so that they don't know about Talia and all this stuff. But then eventually Talia gets found anyways, and they're like, well, you're tasked with finding your mother now. And it's like this whole thing of like, I did all this stuff to protect you and whatever. It's this long-winded thing.
Spaghetti.
Mm-hmm.
Where they're both trying to sacrifice themselves to save the other.
You're right.
Kind of.
But basically what it comes down to is that when you guys defeated Ozymandias, it created a time paradox where he never existed and he never did anything. And so everything that he did do was unwritten, which like puts you back in the exact same situation of like, if he never did this stuff, then everything would have played out the same way. So he would have existed and came out and did this again. So basically all that you guys did was stop him from converting the earth tree into the root, which is good. So you basically just stopped him, but it didn't like erase or change anything. And so now people are coming back out of hiding. Things are going back into the natural order. The deities are coming back and they're like taking control of things and whatever. And so like the story from here on out is what you guys make it. So when you defeated the time paradox, that didn't undo the campaign. That just, made it so that you stopped him here. If that makes sense.
We stopped him in one of them.
We canceled the apocalypse.
Which is why I ended the campaign with this sentiment. Which I love so much, and I'll go ahead and read it. But this will be the last thing that I read before I call it. A figure trudges through the endless sands, the sky a burning horizon that stretches in all directions. Her motivation unwavering, for her destination is certain, even if her path is not. On her travels, she comes across a lone figure that stands in the desert. He gazes into the sands as if seeing what they once were and feeling the weight at seeing the state of them now. His vision unperturbed, despite the sweltering heat that could fell most mortals and the lack of protection he had on his weathered form. When she approached and asked him what he was doing, he explained his plight and the legacies he both created and destroyed. His words were confusing, as if they were from various perspectives, and his story were from various points in time. Though this seemed impossible, paradoxical even, she tried her best to understand. One story stood out in particular, though. It was when she realized that he was talking about himself, from her perspective, in another life, when he had said all these things before. He said, "I met a traveler from an ancient land who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stones stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip, and sneer of cold command, tell that its sculptor well those passions read which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty in despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." She stared at him long and hard, waiting patiently for him to confess all his sins and explain how, despite everything he did, no matter how many countless times he tried, he was incapable of changing anything. In the end, everything he did meant nothing, and that he was never truly capable of accomplishing anything at all. All the people tried to save, control, or destroy all came back to haunt him just the same. Just like every mountain he created moved and crumbled, all came from and returned to dust. Everything that ever could be became just numerous, unfathomably infinite, and pointless as the sand that lay before him. He wondered if this was destiny, fate, his legacy, if anything was accountable, or if it was all meaningless, if it amounted to the same end result. She asked him what he wanted, to which he did not have an answer. Not anymore. At one point he had wanted it all, but it meant nothing if he did not have anyone to share it with. She took him by the hand and led him away from that place. She said that she didn't know where they were going, but that she could come along with him. She said that she didn't care where he came from, as long as they made it together. She said it doesn't matter if you don't have anyone. You have her now. A family is not something to be hunted or earned. It is created, found, and made, and it comes from where you least expect and deserve. She said that she did not have anything, but was willing to share. And that is what made the difference. And that's the beautiful edit that I threw in at the end of the campaign that was just like kind of showing that Ozymandias and Calypso were happy together in a weird way, where this optimistic person came and found this, negative person and said that it's not about the end result, it's about the journey kind of thing. Yeah. Anywho. That's kind of the story of that campaign. It's a campaign that I poured a lot of heart and soul into, and unfortunately, we didn't really get to see a lot of it. It kind of fell apart, and it was overall just kind of a disappointing experience. But yeah. I really liked it. Despite
I loved
everything. It's the last campaign that I actually wrote stuff for, though, which is why I think I liked it so much. Any final thoughts before I go get some lunch?
The cycle begins anew.
For a moment, I was just confused when you said before I go get some lunch, and I didn't remember that we have like 5 hours difference in the time zone.
It's noon for me.
I'm gonna go grab some lunch as well. You guys want anything?
No.
Nope.
All right. Bye.